Hey friends, this is Karen with Blue Rooster Farm, and today I've been cooking a lot in the kitchen, making several videos for you. And this is one of my all-time favorite chocolate cakes. And it uses this vegetable right here, zucchini. And right now we are just starting our zucchini season and we have a lot of it on the vine. So if the bugs don't get it, we're going to have a lot this year. So if you want to see my zucchini chocolate cake, stick around. I'll show you how to make it. Thanks for sticking around. Well, this recipe, like I said, is my all-time favorite chocolate cake because it's moist, it is rich flavored, um, it's great with any kind of icing. We use it for birthday cakes, for just basic summertime cakes. I use different icings on it. Sometimes I put like a German chocolate icing on it. Sometimes I do more of a chocolatey buttercream or even a 7-minute whipped white fluffy icing. Those are all good. I've also done a cream cheese icing on it. So it can do all sorts of icings. It can also stand alone. I can sprinkle some chocolate chips in it and some nuts and then not put any icing on it at all. And it's a great snack cake. But this original recipe came from a Springfield, Missouri R12 school food service cookbook that they put together. And I believe this was probably about 1990. And the recipe was from a cook, looks like Betty Lindsay from Mark Twain. That's Mark Twain Elementary, where I went to elementary school. And she put this recipe in the book. Now, I changed it up a bit. So it's not the identical recipe, but I took this recipe and I made it several years like this. And then it's like, oh, I think I can change things around just a little bit. And I did. And so this is the recipe that we use all the time, the one I'm going to show you. So this cake starts off, and we're going to use the mixer, but if you don't have a mixer, you certainly don't have to. You can use a handheld mixer too. We're going to start by creaming our butters together and our oils. So you'll need 1 stick of softened or room temperature butter. Now, you can use margarine or oil, but I guarantee you they're not going to taste the same. I always use butter when I'm baking. You just have a whole different texture and flavor. So I've got a stick of butter, also a 1/2 cup of oil, and this you can use whatever kind of oil you have on hand. I believe this is probably canola oil. You can use vegetable oil. You can use corn oil. You can use whatever oil you normally bake with, okay? But I usually bake with vegetable oil, corn oil, canola oil, or a mixture. Get all that oil in there. Okay, so let's just mix these 2 butters together a little bit. Be careful when turning it on. You don't want to splatter it. Okay, we just got that butter broken down into that oil. Now we're going to add 1 and 3/4 cup of sugar, and that's just white sugar. I think I've used brown sugar before, and I think it tasted really good. So if you only have brown sugar on hand, you could use that. So let's go ahead and cream with that. So I got that nice and smooth, fluffy. Just scrape down the sides. Now we're going to be adding our eggs. This calls for 2 eggs. One, 2, and we're going to mix that. That's nice and creamy in there. Next, we're going to add a 1/2 cup of sour milk. Now, I use buttermilk. If I don't have, well, I should say, if I hadn't had buttermilk on hand before, I would have used milk and a tablespoon of vinegar or lemon juice, or a little bit of sour cream in there, or a 1/2 cup of yogurt. Now that I know how to make my own buttermilk, I keep it on hand all the time. So I've got a thing of buttermilk over there on top of the refrigerator, just getting itself cultured and ready to be put back in the refrigerator. But I keep 2 jars going, and that way I always have some on hand. So we're going to take a 1/2 cup of our sour milk, which I'm using buttermilk. And I just dripped that all over, didn't I? Need to watch what I'm doing. So let's just pour that in there. And we've got it. If you want to know how I do my buttermilk, I'll show a link right up here and also put something in the notes below. Okay, so let's mix that sour milk in. And while that's mixing, I'm going to add a teaspoon of vanilla and a teaspoon of almond flavoring. If you don't have the almond flavor, just leave it out. Okay, now that that's all mixed together, we've got all of our liquid ingredients mixed together. Now we're going to put our dry ingredients, and let me clean up my spot here, get this out of the way. We are going to put in 2½ cups of flour. And I'm just going to add all the dry ingredients and then mix it. We need a 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. We need 1 teaspoon of baking soda. Now, if you're wondering why I have that recipe book, I taught in Springfield, Missouri for about 10 years before we moved up to northern Missouri so that I could stay home and be a mom. I taught elementary school, 1st grade. Okay, so we have our baking powder and baking soda. Then we need 1/2 teaspoon of salt. We need half a cup of cocoa. Now, if you want yours less cocoa, you can use less. If you like it even richer, you could add more. I'm adding about a half a cup. And so now we have all the dry ingredients right here on top, and we're going to mix those, but we're not going to over mix it. We're just going to mix it until the flour and everything's incorporated. And this is going to be a pretty thick batter. I'm going to show you what the batter looks like so that when you are cooking this and you see how thick it is, you're not concerned. Okay, it's almost like a brownie batter, quite thick. Okay. Next, we're going to add our 2 cups of shredded zucchini. And I am very generous with zucchini because a lot of times you have more than you need, and I don't like to waste it. So I'll just put whatever I have left inside the batter as long as it's not a whole lot more. But most of the things that I make aren't bothered by adding a little more zucchini. So you do what you think is best, but I'm packing this zucchini down and I'm going past the 2 cup line. This zucchini is actually pretty dry. It's not as moist. Maybe it's because it's been sitting there for just a little bit. All right, so I have a full packed down 2 cup measuring cup. Pour that in there, and then I'm just going to give it a real quick stir. And once you add the zucchini, you'll notice that it does get a little more loose in the batter, and you'll see a little more moisture. That's why zucchini makes everything so moist, all that water. You'll need a greased 9x13 pan, or if you want to make cupcakes with it, you can. But I prefer the cake. It seems to be moist with being cooked in the large quantity. Clean your batter off. That zucchini can be hard to get off because it likes to hang across those beaters. Let's taste it. That's good. Okay, scrape the bowl. Make sure everything's incorporated. Now for this cake, you're going to want your oven to be on 350 preheated oven. Now I shredded my zucchini in the food processor. If you didn't have a food processor, if you didn't have a food processor and you didn't want to get it out and get it all dirty, you can definitely just chop it up, and you can have little cubes of it, but you don't want them too big because that way you'll see them in there. But you can definitely chop it up and have the zucchini that way. I also leave the green skin on unless there's damage to the green skin. That would be the only time I would take it off. Or if it's really old, I don't know why you'd be using it, but if it's an older, tougher skin, you might want to peel it. These were all young zucchini, and they didn't have the seeds formed yet. But if you did cut a zucchini and it had the seeds, that's okay. I would scoop the seeds out, especially if they're harder, and then I would just shred or chop the meat portion of your zucchini. That way you won't have any of those hard bits in your cake. Okay, make sure your cake is level, and I always make sure that the middle part isn't bulged up, because if it is, that means it's just going to get farther higher up when we bake it. Push that to the sides. The sides are going to cook the quickest, and you don't want those to dry out, so make that a little thicker on the sides. All right, and we are ready to put this in for 45 minutes at 350. I'll bring it back when it's done. I have brought you back because I was going to make some icing for the zucchini chocolate cake. And so this does not have any measurements or any recipe because I usually just eyeball this. I will give you approximately what I'm using. I've got 1 stick of real butter, and it is softened a little bit, not too warm. We don't want it to be melted because we want this icing to be fluffy. And I'm just going to soften it up a little more in my mixer. Okay. Then what I've done is I have taken, well, let me go ahead and add a little bit of cream to this. And if you just have milk, that's okay. You can just use milk. I have the cream, so I will use cream. Get the lid open. And probably 1/4 of a cup to start with. Just kind of get that mixed in. Looks like that's been mixed together. Now I'm going to take some powdered sugar, and this is powdered sugar that I made with real sugar. So if you want to see how you can make your own powdered sugar, check out my video. Let's start with a keeping 1/3 cup. We're just kind of getting a little bit of it mixed up because the chocolate that we're going to add is still warm, and I kind of want to have that distributed without melting the butter. So let's add another 1/3 cup. Then I'm going to add some almond and vanilla. I'm going to add about a teaspoon of both. Okay, so we added a teaspoon of vanilla and a teaspoon of almond flavoring. Now I have about a half a cup of melted chocolate, and I had some dark 100% Ghirardelli unsweetened cocoa, and I had just some chocolate chips, semi-sweet chocolate chips, and when I melted them down, it came to about a half a cup. I sometimes just use all chocolate chips, just depending on what I have, all semi or all unsweetened chocolate. It's just whatever I have. And you can use more or less depending on the fudginess of your frosting. This frosting probably won't be real chocolatey, but it will be really good. It'll be a lighter chocolate. So I'm going to add a third cup of powdered sugar again. About another 2 tablespoons of cream. And then I'm going to scrape the sides. Give that a mix. And we're going to go with about 2 or 3 tablespoons of cream. That was about a cup of powdered sugar. Those were third cups, so I added 3 of them. I'm going to scrape down the sides. I'm going to taste it and see what kind of consistency we have. It's really good. I'm going to add a couple tablespoons more of cream. Two-thirds more of powdered sugar. Scrape down the sides. add just a pinch of salt. The cocoa, the dark cocoa, it'll kind of bring that flavor out a little bit more. Need just a little bit of salt with it. My butter was unsalted. Now this icing will become firm in the refrigerator because of the butter and the chocolate. It will stay soft at room temperature. Just kind of scrape the sides down. And I'm going to wait until the cake is fully cool before I put this on. If I put it on now, it will just melt down the butter and the chocolate and it won't be fluffy. So I'm just going to set this aside until the cake is cool and then we'll frost the cake.